Good morning and welcome to this latest in our series of PPMA webinars. I'm Claudia McClellan, a Wellbeing Consultant at Essex County Council and an extended board member for PPMA. The usual housekeeping arrangements apply for the session, so please do keep yourself muted unless you are asking a question. Feel free to have your camera on. If you have got any questions or thoughts as you go along, just drop those into the chat and we'll keep Gary, who's with us today, involved in some of that. We've got a really great session planned today, Culture Club and getting people professionals fit for the future. So it's great to see some familiar names to me on here today. The developments in remote and hybrid working obviously mean that our remit as people professionals has changed along with the skill sets that we need. And obviously this has a knock-on in terms of the types of job roles that we need within the people profession too. So today we'll be reflecting on these changes, how they affect our roles and some of the practical and cultural aspects to consider. So really delighted today to be joined by Gary Cookson, who is the author of HR for Hybrid Working. I'm giving you a wave at the moment. Gary is an expert in workplace performance with experience of leading HR, OD and L&D functions across all sectors. But as we've only got 30 minutes for this huge topic, I'm going to hand over to Gary, who I know will introduce himself in a much more human-centred way. So thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Claudia. Hello, everybody. Hello. Really pleased to be here today. Thank you for inviting me along for this. You can see the title of the session that we're going to cover on the screen today. A bit of a meaty mouthful. So I thought, can we come up with something a little bit sexier than that? So I'm calling it Culture Club. And as Claudia mentioned, the areas of focus that we have as people professionals changed a little bit because of the pandemic. We need to focus much more on things like change, OD, digital transformation, the employee experience more besides. So I'm going to reflect on a little bit of this and how it leads us towards an individualized employee experience that I think is now necessary for remote and hybrid working to be effective in the long term. We've got to follow through on this. That means that our remit as people professionals, it's changed, and the skill set we have, that's changed too. It also then means that some of the job roles that we have, as Claudia mentioned, is going to change as well. And all that's achievable if technology can help us with automating some of the routine tasks, and it can, but that's going to change the structure of the teams that we have in our organizations as well. Our work's going to change. The work we do with individuals, with leaders, with the organization, is going to take on different form, different function. We've got to work with them to understand the pain points that they have, and they're different than what it was pre-pandemic. We've got to deliver much more tailored solutions as well and be closer to what really, really matters in organizations. So we need to know far more than we ever did about culture, on giving the right intelligence to the organization, on building psychological safety and wellness, and on building something that's flexible enough to change in the future, but is nonetheless bigger, better, and more fit for our and their future. So in this session, we're going to look at how all this changes your role and some of the practical and cultural aspects to consider if we're going to get people professionals fit for the future. So who am I? Let me tell you a bit more about me. If you want to stalk me on social media, by the way, feel free. You see these types of images about my life. I'm a father of 4, husband of 1, and in the little bit of spare time that I get, I run my own business. I work with individuals, teams, and organizations all over the world, helping them to become better at what matters to them. But my background is in the people profession. I've got 20 plus years now working at director level in the public, private, and voluntary sector, all around the northwest of the UK, and now running my own business. And I've been working in a hybrid way now for probably in excess of 2 decades. It isn't something that came new to me when the pandemic hit. I've been helping individuals, leading teams and advising organizations how to deliver their services in a hybrid way for 20 or more years. And when the pandemic hit, everybody started asking me how I'd been doing some of these things. So I started distilling some of that advice into some of the thinking that you're going to get very, very shortly. From a logistical perspective, just to expand on what Claudia said, we started bang on 12 o'clock. We'll see how far we get in terms of the content. People will dip in and out of the session, but I intend this to be quite an interactive session. I've got ways of getting some information out of you. I want you to use the chat panel as much as you can. I've got some questions to ask you that you can answer using that, and a few other ways to get you interacting as well. Let's just show you how you can do that. Let's test out that you can use chat. Find chat, please, should be at the bottom right of your screen. Make sure you send in messages to everyone, please. And can you tell me two things in chat, please? Can you tell me, number one, where are you in the world today? And number two, what's the weather like today? So those two things I want you to tell me in chat. That'll reassure me that you can hear me, that you can find chat, and that you've got a window you can look out of. And I'm in the middle of Cheshire in the northwest of the UK today. And it's a lovely, bright and sunny day today, but it's very, very cold. But it's a gorgeous day for going out for a run, which is what I'm going to do this afternoon. Nice, crisp, bright weather. And what's it like everywhere else? It's cold in the UK today, pretty much everywhere else, but nice and sunny in most of the places that people are telling me they're from. So thank you for letting me know about that. Thank you. Chat is yours to use as much as you want today. Ask questions, answer questions, react to things, make observations. You use it as much as you want to today. We're going to use chat to do some of the polls that I've planned today as well, because we haven't got polls set up. So we're going to do them using chat. Other ways you can interact today. You've got the ability to use all the different reactions that you would like to use throughout the session today. Use them as you see fit. The only one that I'm going to ask you to just note where it is the raise hand function. And that's because at the moment, you've got your microphone on mute. And I'd like you to keep it that way until or unless you're ready to ask a question. And the way you let me know that you're ready to ask a question and open your microphone is by raising your hand. That way I can bring you in at the right point, and it avoids people talking over each other and the chaos of background noise, different things like that. So the raise hand function is how you're going to do that. So please keep your microphone on mute until you're ready for that to happen. And Claudia mentioned cameras earlier on. Makes no difference whatsoever whether you have your camera on or not. It's a personal choice. You're a grown-up and you should be allowed to make grown-up decisions. So if you want your camera on, you put your camera on. If you want your camera off, you turn it off. It makes no difference whatsoever to how it's going. So let's talk a bit about why I'm here. Well, there is a bit of an elephant in the room, as Claudia mentioned, and that's because I wrote a book. I know some of you have been talking to me about this book in the past. Some of you have been on sessions that I've run that share some of the thinking and research about the book already. And if you are going to buy the book, I'd love to hear from you and how you're getting through with reading it and some of your comments on it. A lot of the thinking from the book is coming to you today. So if you like what you hear today, there's more where that came from. But let's get into the main content for today. The CIPD did a survey, people profession in 2030. They published it last year, what this year might bring for the people profession. It was published actually about 18 months ago at the end of 2020. Summarised the focus for people professionals like us, you and I, as being, firstly, internal change. So evolving organisational models, structures, processes. They also talk about digital transformation, led by technology. They talk about changing demographics being a focus for us, and that obviously impacts diversity and inclusion. They talk, fourth bit, about diversifying employment relationships, different types of employment contracts and relationships we might have. And fifth, they talk about sustainability, purpose, responsible business. Now, it's possible to see how those types of trends, part of wider changes that were taking place in our profession and business way before COVID hit, and way before hybrid working became a major focus for many of our organisations. But it's also to see how the pandemic and the experiences we had in the last 2 years shaped and brought some of these things more to the forefront of what we do. And in the book, I talk about changing the way work is done to cope with hybrid working. And that neatly fits into many of these areas, particularly the first one around internal change. But it requires a great deal of agility within the organisation, a demand for more organisational design and development skills from us. So my first poll, which we're going to do using chat, is getting you to reflect on those 5 areas. And you can see it on screen now, and there's a letter assigned to each of the areas there. And I'd like you to use chat, please. Which is the biggest of these 5 for you in your organisation? So which is the biggest of the 5 in your organisation? No doubt all of them feature at some point, but if you could just pick one of them, which one would that be? Use your letter A, B, C, D, or E to let me know in chat which is the biggest one. And then we'll see. I have to try and keep a visual eye on this just to tot up the numbers. The numbers you can see so far heavily skewed towards A. At the moment, most people are saying that is the biggest one so far. If you wanted to add to this, by the way, feel free to add to this in chat and tell us why this is. And I appreciate, Claudia, it is a bit difficult to choose because all 5 of them. But if you had to come off the fence, Claudia, and pick one of these, which one would that be? Everybody going for A so far, which is really interesting. And that's the one I think is the biggest as well. And the people I talk to, the clients I have, that seems to be the biggest one. So yeah, feel free to add to this. By the way, you can add some additional thoughts about why you've picked A if you want to, or why you feel some of the other ones might be bigger. So that's interesting to see. It's mostly around internal change. It's around changing the structures, changing the processes, and hybrid working, of course, does all of that. The organization exists as a system with its interrelated parts. And if we change one aspect of it, we must change all the others as consequential impacts of that. So hybrid working is something that does lead us towards A. And you're right, Claudia, B does help A as well. More on that in a second, because that changes who we are as well. So what's our challenge then? Well, the organizations that could foresee and predict the onset of remote or hybrid working, and there were quite a few, some case studies of which are available in the book. They were good at horizon scanning. They were good at anticipating how external events would shape the world of work. And the events that have happened in the last 2.5 years have enhanced that for everybody else, but everybody else up to that point. Now, digital and technological transformation, like Claudia said, and remote and hybrid working, they clearly go hand in hand. And we've got to use technology to deliver our people practices, and we've got to use data to do that better. Inclusion and belonging take on slightly different forms and aspects in remote and hybrid working, as you've no doubt experienced. Different protected characteristics are impacted either positively or negatively by those types of working. And we've got to give much more guidance to our organizations and those leading and working with teams to bring that sense of belonging and inclusion into a remote team. Individual circumstances have got to be considered as well, and their environments as well. Hybrid working is not, has never been, and will never be a one-size-fits-all approach. To make it work, we have to have a highly individualized employee experience. And we've got to support people's mental health and well-being. And that's a major organizational challenge now, something that can't be left just to the people profession. It's not a people practice initiative anymore. It's not part of your reward offering anymore. It's a leadership competency. It's something that all organizations must follow through on, building that supportive culture of well-being. And that means collectively, our remit, yours and mine, it's changed. Some things are more important than they ever were. And as people professionals, we've seen we're much more involved in certain things than we ever were as well. And we've got to adapt. We've got to grow alongside that. That's got big implications for our skill levels as well. The CIPD commented on this as well in their 2021 People Profession Survey. They said that most of us feel that we've increased our standing in organizations. Great, fantastic. But they also said around 2/3 of us have had to upskill or reskill completely because of that. So what kinds of things are we now seeing are the most important skills for us going forward? Now, it's easy to see how certain things have jumped towards the top of our list of skills. Let's take a look at some of them. Digital skills. Seems obvious, doesn't it? If it wasn't already top of the required list of skills for a people professional, it's now absolutely critical. Secondly, given the amount of organizational change and redesign that our organizations have gone through, and you mentioned that as the biggest area of focus for you, business partnering type skills are also likely to be much more important, ensuring that we can talk the language of the business and contribute as equals within it. Thirdly, I mentioned well-being before, but awareness of the factors that influence and impact mental health and how to leverage those in a positive way. Critical skill set for people professionals because of the impact that remote and hybrid working has on an individual's mental health. Fourthly, OD, and from that I mean both organizational design and organizational development, navigating our organizations through the challenges of the future, thinking of organizations as the systems that they undoubtedly are, and approaching our work in that way, given that we'll be working much more asynchronously, which we'll talk about later on, and away from other people. It's a growing area for us. Fifth, about L&D skills, the move to online learning, remote learning. It's only going to get bigger. And that means that particularly live online classrooms of things that illustrated the importance of different things for our L&D colleagues, production skills, hosting skills, online facilitation skills, different bits of knowledge of instructional design and learning technology. They might be specialist roles, but in many organizations, they won't be. We probably need to emphasize their use in other environments too, like face-to-face learning, as well as with remote and hybrid ones. And then finally, data. We'll talk about data quite a lot, I think, but leveraging what technology can provide us in relation to employees who we're not co-located with, who we may never see, looking at elements of performance data and linking that to data we have in our systems. We should not be blinkered or hampered by thinking that we can only use the data that's in our systems, because it's never going to be enough. That's going to be challenging for some people, professionals. They've got to be able to analyze, interrogate, correlate the data they've got with the data in other organizational systems, and help the managers they support to do that as well. So we've got to know what data is available, what state it's in, where it is, and how each interaction between the employee and the organization creates information that we must use to enhance the employee experience. We've got to get better than that. The tech is already there, by the way, but our skills are not going at the same pace as the technology is. We've got to get the right intelligence to the right people, the right teams at the right point, so that all of those can perform better. And I listened to Gianpaolo Barozzi from Cisco talking about this at a summit about 18 months ago now, and he talked about wearable technology. And if we think about the wearable technology that we all tend to see and use nowadays, that delivers intelligence to people at the point of need for people to decide about and do something with. We've got to think about delivering our services in the same way, using wearable technology and other things like AR, VR, AI. So here's a second poll for you. I've just talked about 6 different skills. Which of these is the most important for you to work on? Just you as an individual, not anybody else in your team, you. Which is the most important one for you to upskill or reskill in? So again, there's a letter. Pop a letter in chat, please. Here we might see a mix, I think, because context is king here, and you're all at different levels and doing different specialist tasks in your role, so we might well see a mix. And indeed, if you look in chat, that is what we're seeing. We're seeing a good mix here of C's, F's, A's and D's. So A and F clearly go together quite well, and I think probably there's a theme emerging there around improving the way we use data and improving the way we use technology. So there is a bit of a theme there, but people talking about some other things as well. So C and D coming through again. OD skills I've talked about quite a lot today already. And the mental health stuff is a bit of a theme that runs through everything like a stick of rock. So thank you for that. It's really interesting to see. So where do we take this? Well, a question for you to think about. And this is one you can answer in chat, or maybe you can save up some thoughts for a wider discussion at the end. What have you been doing about to check the level of skills of your teams of people professionals and either upskill or reskill them? I asked you a question just now in a poll about what your area of reskilling needs to be. But what have you been doing about your wider teams? Many of you are responsible for wider teams or operate within them. What's being done to consciously upskill or reskill the people around you? Now, it's perfectly acceptable to say, hey, nothing, not even giving it a thought, because you wouldn't be alone there. But if you've got some good news to share, some success stories that you can share with other people, throw that into chat, or get ready later on when we move into the wider discussion to raise your hand and open your microphone and tell everybody about that, because you might find that you can help other people with their thinking on this. I'm going to tell you about some of the things that I think you should be doing very, very shortly, but I'd love to see some examples come through in chat. So if you do have some things you've been consciously doing, please throw those into chat and I'll pick up on those as and when they come through. But I think this means we've got to have new roles in our teams, and that might be something you've been doing, something you've been thinking about. But after today, perhaps it's something you need to give a bit greater thought on. Now, I listened to Margaret Heffernan talk 6 years ago now at the CIPD conference 2016. She said that people professionals need to fuse technology, innovation, and people. Now, that was 6 years ago, but how prescient a talk that was for the environment we find ourselves in now. And the events of the last 2 years illustrate the points she was making perfectly. And to me, this means I think we've got 4 main people professional roles emerging as more critical in this world, which I'm going to come on to very shortly. Claudia, thank you. The PPMA Peer into the Future program is a good thing to start thinking about, and a good thing to get you to just to analyze the skill sets and knowledge base that you might have in your team. So there's one thing. And maybe, Claudia, I don't know whether you could share a link to that. If people aren't aware of it, maybe you could share a link in chat. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. So let's think about these 4 roles. I think there's 4 roles that we need to be promoting more within our teams. Firstly, the role of an experienced champion. There's loads of large firms like Netflix and Virgin and others that talk a lot about ditching bureaucracy and encouraging people teams to let go of policy, focus on the individual. And for many of us in the public sector or from a public sector background, that seems a bit scary, doesn't it? But we're going to need more of that, of social engagement in the workplace and looking at how people are treated and how they feel about work. So there's one. Second is a performance coach. It's an old role, but it's a growing one, helping people to identify what performance actually is and the best conditions under which they can produce it. I listened to Clive Woodward, ex-England rugby coach, talk many, many years ago about how he got his players, who were his employees really, to visualize being under pressure and practice performing under high pressure conditions. He was using technology then, nearly 20 years ago, to capture performance data and provide that to his players. And he was upskilling them in their ability to analyze performance, share insights, share data, discuss it. So that means we need a better understanding, I think, of psychology, of human behavior, of how people interact, how people think, goes hand in hand with those skills. That would enable us to make performance management more focused on the individual and address issues at a much deeper level. We almost need to be like a personal trainer type of thing, but focused on people's minds as opposed to their bodies. I could wear another hat, by the way. I am a qualified personal trainer, and I have a lot of thinking and research about nutrition and diet and hydration, and also the importance of exercise in helping people in work to perform. And if you want to talk to me about that, or you just want somebody to be mean to you in a field on a Sunday morning, you can do that, but that's not what this session is about. Anyway, we need wellness advocates as well. There's your third role, not in an individual sense per se, but in an organizational sense. I think here we need people professionals who can be the guardians of what I call organizational wellness, looking at systems of engagement, looking at motivation, looking at performance, and how all those things link together and complement each other, and whether ethical behavior is being promoted and adhered to in the organization. Fourth role is data analysts. You're probably expecting this because I've talked about this a lot already. We need people professionals who can select and use the right data, who can throw data sets together, correlate it, analyze it, predict trends, and now not enough can. Now, what does this mean? We're moving towards, I think, an ERM type system. We can collect stacks of data about what customers do, and we can use that to tailor services and products. But we can do that, it's possible, it's desirable to do the same for employees. Even with a small number of employees, you can do it just more informally. For example, most of your people practice systems store loads of data about your employees, but most of it's relatively static, used for reporting purposes. There aren't many organizations who are actively using that data to segment your employee population, to map out the employee journey the same way that you already do for customers. There aren't many organizations that have a record of every employee interaction with the organization and then use that to tailor services and base the employee experience on that. And if you think that's impossible, it's not. The technology is there. Think about when you go onto Facebook and you see adverts for things that you've spoken about or sometimes even just thought about, and it's tailoring. It's like witchcraft, your whole online experience based on what you've done in the past. The technology is clearly there. We could use it to unlock greater engagement. We could tailor that to the individual employee. Loads of systems can give you far more data than you think is possible about what people do, how they operate, and you can use it then to predict what people might need support-wise, learning-wise. You could look at internal social media and stalk what people are doing there. Look at those social media channels to see when people are asking questions. What are they asking questions about? Who's answering them? What guidance are they giving them? We could then recognize the pain points that our employees are having and use that to curate resources, to connect them with people, to provide support. Again, it's data. It's just not data we have in our people practice systems. So we can do loads more with our data. Another question then is about what you've been doing to change the roles of people professionals. This is something you can throw into chat if you've got examples here of changing the team structure, the team roles. Maybe you've ditched some roles altogether in your team. Maybe in your team there's a brand new role that's been brought on stream. This is a good opportunity to showcase that if you've got examples, or later when we move into the discussion, to raise your hand and open your microphone. Have you been doing anything to redesign some of your roles? Because I think the time is right to do that, because we've got some real challenges ahead of us. Many of us are becoming what I call the ultimate generalist. If you're in a really small organization, you probably already were able to turn your hand and skills to almost anything the organization needs. But I see our role as a bit like being a decathlete in the Summer Olympics. You might not enjoy all the 10 different things that you have to do or be able to perform at world-class level in all of them, but only by doing all of them, whether on your own or as part of a team, can you reach the levels of contribution that the organization needs from you. We've also got to consider that many of the routine transactional things that we might have done ourselves in years gone by, much more likely to be automated now, delivered directly from a system to the employee, cutting out the middle person, us. And the delivery of most of those types of functions is going to be digital by default in the future for most of your organizations. That means we have to change. We've got to reposition our skill sets, move away from a delivery of knowledge focus, because technology is going to do that for us, enables us to focus on the things I've mentioned already today and individualize that employee experience. Third and final poll for today is about how confident you are that you and your team have got the right blend of skills to support the organization in the future. So the last poll was about you. This is about you and your wider team. Give us a letter in chat, please. How confident are you that you've got the right things in place here? I can see D's coming through and a bit of B as well, which is interesting to see. Nobody's going for the extremes here, and that was what I was hoping. I think if you're broadly in the middle of B, C, or D, you're in the right place, and probably you're well placed to help your organisation as well. Clearly, if you're A, then there's lots more people who want to hear from you about how you've done things, and if you're an E, then well, maybe you're not in the wrong place particularly, but you've got a long journey ahead of you. So B, C, or D, I think, is where I expect most people professionals to be. So where do we take this then? Let's sum up some of the things that I reckon. I think the entire nature of the people profession has changed. Remote working has made us all think about where we need to be, not just physically, but metaphorically speaking as well. We've got to be far more comfortable as a profession, not having close physical proximity to our stakeholders, but being connected with them in other ways. For example, if we're working asynchronously, we need to be recording audio voice notes for people and sending video messages instead of holding out for a video meeting. That would allow the asynchronous work to take place more effectively. It enables us to get better at sharing knowledge and curating resources then that support that way of working. Now, it sounds like a big step, but it's not. There are lots of people professionals already doing it. And if you've worked in an organization that's had globally dispersed teams, then you've been doing it for many years and you've got relevant experience that you can do. Now, in the UK public sector, that's never really been a feature, but there's plenty of people professionals who you could recruit that have got that way of working, who've got that mindset. And it might well be that in doing that, you find some people in your teams that don't want to work like that. And maybe they will need to find an organization that suits them. And maybe we need to be parting ways with some of those people, potentially. We're going to find new people coming into the profession as a result. I spoke to Perry Timms, and bits of this appear in the book, about how he would explain what our profession is to those people who are just thinking of joining it. He said he would talk about the transactional nature of work, individuals giving their skills in exchange for reward, but that work should be something that people enjoy, should be done in an organization that values them, treats them well, and that the people profession is about helping anybody in the world of work to navigate their way to doing good work in a good organization. And it doesn't really matter where people work or when, it's about how we treat them. I think that's a good explanation. That reminds me of how I once explained what I do for a living to my eldest daughter, who's now 17, but then she was 3. She came to me when she was 3 and she said, "What do you do at work, Daddy?" And I don't know whether you've ever tried explaining HR to an adult, let alone a child. It's tricky. And the best definition I came up with was that Daddy's job is to help people feel happier at work. And when you break it down, that's not far from the truth, really. And I've actually not got any better explanation of what I do in the 14 years since. She was happy with that. The downside to that is that she thought my job involved painting, because when she was 3, that was the thing that made her happiest. She thought I got people to paint in the workplace. And 14 years later, she still thinks that, and I can't be bothered correcting her. But a nice update to all of that is to measure the effectiveness of what you do by how you make other people feel. And clearly good work for all is a big part of that. Maybe we need to focus on working with teams and getting them working effectively in a hybrid environment, making sure that they do good work within their own environs and with their own boundaries. And maybe we can then change organizations one team at a time or one individual at a time, because we can focus far more on leaders of those teams. Most of my book focuses on the key role that leaders play in creating the right employee experience and how that's changed in a remote and hybrid world of work, something that's stressed in almost every report that you read from the CIPD and other bodies as well. COVID accelerated what was already happening in organizations. It didn't create what we're facing now, it just accelerated that pace of change. So we've got to work more closely with the leaders. We've got to be more closer to and more aware of the pain points they have, getting us to be delivering targeted, tailored solutions. We're also much more likely to see the data that the leaders use to make decisions about the people in their teams. And the data they use is not data we have in our teams, in our systems. It's data that's outside it. So we need to be working differently to that. Sharing data we've got as opposed to holding on to it and accessing data they've got rather than not thinking about it. We'll be much closer to the stuff that really matters in organizations, how people are treated at work. So remote and hybrid working, not about the technology, it's about the people, it's about the culture. People matter far more than that. We need to be able to cope culturally by using the right technology. There's got to be psychological safety, sense of inclusion and belonging, a focus on well-being and treating people well for it all to work. And that's what we need to do. We've got to do things that are not just a blend of the remote and the face-to-face, but somehow have the best elements of both and build something greater than some of its parts. And to do that, we need people professionals like you who are flexible, not driven by policies and procedures, but guided by principles and values. It means we focus on well-being more. It means we use data more. It means we need to be human and authentic and encourage leaders to do that far more as well. And it's the role of us to make sure that happens and that it works when it does. And final question for you to think about before I go into wider questions is for you to share anything you might have been doing to redesign what work actually is, the tasks themselves. I mentioned just then about not taking and merging the remote and face-to-face worlds and mushing it together which is what the label hybrid suggests, but taking the best of both to create something better. And if you've been doing something on that, then please share that in chat. Have you been changing jobs and tasks? Let me sum up what I've been covering today. Some things to think about. No things that you have to respond to particularly today, but consider them as a sum up and take these away. Feel free to take a screenshot of this or a picture on your device. What we do is got to have flexibility built into it. It's got to join up well with everything. We've got to have visibility. We've got to have credibility within the organization so that senior leaders seek us out when they're making decisions. We've got to have close working relationships with other functions that shape the employee experience. It's not just us anymore. Probably never was. The jobs in the organization need to be flexible enough to be recrafted, probably at speed. The technology we have has got to be fit for purpose and allow for just the most important people processes to be automated and improved and help employees to manage their time. We've got to be certain of where those touch points are in the organization where our remote working population need extra and more focused support. We've got to help managers and guide them on the implications of remote and hybrid working. We can't leave that to chance. Teams likewise need our guidance. We need to facilitate the way they work so that they can become mature enough to do it without us. But right now, we can't leave that to chance. We've got to use data better. We've got to focus on well-being. We've got to improve what we do in L&D. We've got to change the way that we provide support to our organizations. And all of this is the start of something bigger, something better. It's in your hands. Good luck with it. So thank you, Steph, for your comment in chat as well, which is good about making it more relevant to the people who can't do as much of that as maybe other people. But I can take some questions now in the time we have left. I'll leave a picture of my book on screen because you're not getting away without seeing that again. What I've been trying to talk to you about is some of the things we need to think about to change our focus, to change our roles in the future. And hopefully I've given you some food for thought. But we can take time for questions.
Thank you, Gary. We'll just see if anything comes into the chat, or do feel free to put your hand up. That was really insightful, and I think probably a lot for people to take in and kind of some questions to go away and reflect on for us and our teams, really.
Okay, so if anybody does have any questions, you can use chat to do that, or raise your hand and open your microphone.
Yeah, we have lost a few people because obviously we've only really got the half hour, so we're overrunning by a little bit. So people have gone to other meetings. But has anyone got anything they want to ask Gary while we've got him here? Comments in the chat about what a great session. So thank you, Gary. No, I can't see anything coming in. So we'll end the session there. Thank you, Gary. Obviously, you've got Gary's contact details if you kind of want to chat through some of that. It's huge, really, in terms of the things to think about. So I think really thought-provoking and great. Obviously, a copy of this session will be placed on the PPMA website. So do share that with colleagues to kind of further those discussions. Otherwise, I wish everyone a great weekend. And thank you very much, Gary, for your time today.